Hello guys, hope you all are doing well. So let's start with a lab for static NAT. So let me quickly go through the topology we are going to use. So in this case, as you can see, we have a firewall, and on the ingress side we have one host PC connected, and on the egress side we have one server connected, right? On For this host PC and server, I am using Cisco router image, and both of them I have configured to act as HTTP server, so that we can initiate the connection from, let's say, host PC towards this R3 server, and we can check how the translation is happening on the firewall. So that's the reason we have enabled HTTP server on router. So let's quickly take a look at what configuration we have done on our routers. Okay, so this is basically a R3 router named as internet. So first thing we have done here is you can see we have configured IP address as 1.1.1.2. Then we have given one static route to point the we have given one static default route pointing towards the egress IP of the firewall, that is 1.1.1.1. Next configuration we have done is we have configured username locally and password of your choice, Then we have configured line configuration to log in using locally, and transport input all, like we are allowing telnet and SSH both. Next we have done is we are going to enable web service, that is IP HTTP server is the command to enable that. You can check show IP HTTP server status. So using this command you can check if the service is running or not. So we can check that IP HTTP server is enabled, and it's enabled on port 80. So this is what the configuration we have done on R3. Similarly, we have done the same configuration on host PC also, as we need to check this for bidirectional NAT. So same configuration is done on both the routers. Okay, now let's come to firewall. So this is the firewall interface. Let's quickly take a look at the interface configuration. So ETH2 is basically our egress interface configured with IP address of 1.1.1. ETH1 is our ingress interface configured with IP address of 10.1. Then virtual router for both of them is a default security zone. For internal, you can say LAN side, it's ingress, and for external it's named as egress. Then when we look at virtual router, we have one default route pointing to R3, that is this web server 1.1.1.2. So this is what the basic configuration that we have done on firewall. So next thing we'll start with doing NAT configuration. So as we can see here, basically we are doing a static NAT for 192.168.10.5 is getting NATed to IP address of 1.1.1.10. So for that, let's start with creating a NAT rule. So we'll go to policies, NAT tab. Let's create one NAT rule. Give it a name static NAT. NAT rule type IPv4 original packet. So as the packet is going to come from egress zone, we'll give it a source zone as egress and destination zone would be egress. Our source IP address, in this case the source IP address is 192.168.10.5 and destination IP address is 1.1.1.2. Right. Then when we come to translation, this is a translation type static. So we are going to translate this to IP address of 1.1.1.10. Okay, so this is the configuration we need to do. As you can see how the rule looks like. Basically it says name as static NAT, no tags assigned, source zone ingress, destination zone egress, destination interface any, source address 192.168.10.5, that's 1.2, and translation is happening on 1.1.10. Okay, as we can see there is no hit count, nothing. When we come to security policy, okay, it's already there, fine. So when creating a security policy, we need to make sure that the IP address we are mentioning here is a pre-NAT IP, that is you can say original IP, which is 192.168.10.1, and destination zone should be post-NAT zone, which is the egress zone. So our source zone and source IP address is given here. Application we have given any actions allow. So this is what the security policy we have created here. Okay, so once that's done, let's commit the changes. In the meantime, let me open a session to put it to firewall. Fine. So we have so this is basically a test PC, right? Now what we are going to do is we are going to telnet from this test PC to this web server. So what ideally we should see IP address getting translated from 10.5 to 1.1.1.10. So let's see. So we'll do telnet. Okay, so it's asking for username. Okay, so there you go, it has logged into this R3 router. Okay, now let's come to firewall and check the translation. As you can see that the application it has identified as a telnet, and the traffic that is coming from the source IP address of 192.168.10.5 with the source port of 15644. The IP has only got translated to 1.10 and the source port remains unchanged. Okay, so this says to us that static NAT translation has happened fine. Now let's check at session ID. So if we look at session ID, this is a client to source flow wherein we can see that the source is this one. It mentions the zone, destination is this one, 1.1.1.2 protocol and all. This is the security rule that it is hitting, and the NAT rule that it is hitting is this static NAT rule. So that basically says to us that static NAT is happening fine. Next thing we can do is we can come to NAT rules and check hit count. It should show, yeah, you see here that the hit count is 1 now. So this is basically our static NAT lab, right? Next, as we discussed about bidirectional NAT, so in a case like let's say if R3 initiates a connection towards host PC as a bidirectional NAT has not been enabled, in this case it will not work. So to get that working, we just need to uh, check this box saying bidirectional so that it will allow the traffic initiated from R3 towards our host PC. Additionally, we would need to create a security policy rule that will say that any any uh, any traffic that is coming from egress with the source IP of 1.1.2 and it is getting into egress with the IP address of 192.168.10.5, that should be allowed. So that's the rule we would need here to get that working. So before enabling that, let's do one thing. Let's try to telnet from R3 towards host PC. It will try to initiate the connection and eventually, as you can see, the connection has been timed out. So now let's do one thing. Let's go to NAT policy, and on NAT policy, let's enable bidirectional NAT and let's do commit. Okay, now the commit has been completed. Now let's try to initiate the connection again from this one, and you can see that now we are able to log into test PC. Okay, so we have not set the enable password. That's the reason it is not allowing us to go into enable port. So let's take a look at the logs on a firewall. And we come to the firewall. Let's session all. So this is our second session, which says that traffic is initiated from 10.5 is going to 1.1.1.10, and 1.1.10 is translating it to 10.5 is getting translated to 1.1.1.10. So let's go to show session ID 2. So in this case, as you can see that the traffic is initiated from 1.2 going to 10.5, right? And it has hit the security rule SP2 that we have created for bidirectional, right? So that's the thing actually. This is how we can do bidirectional NAT also. Fine. So that's it about the static NAT lab for Palo Alto. In next section, we'll see about dynamic lab on Palo Alto. We'll discuss about dynamic lab and we'll do lab on that. Fine. Thanks for your time. You have a good day.